Here we go again. It's Tuesday. It's 8 o'clock. It's time for the GM's podcast. RJ, how we doing?
Fantastic. How about yourself?
It's Tuesday at 8 o'clock, and I'm talking about football and I'm talking about fantasy football with you guys. Life does not suck. Anyways, what we want to do this week is a couple of things. One, a couple of big trades happened this last week, kind of touch on those a little bit. One of the things that we were thinking about as those trades went down is different team building or even specifically rebuilding strategies in this league. What have we seen be successful? What have we seen kind of, you know, win championships? What are different approaches different teams are taking, and what do we think of those? So we'll touch on that a little bit, and then we'll dive into our division by division preview of the offseason. And we'll start with two of the AFC divisions, and we'll kind of do two at a time for the next couple of these podcasts. Sound good?
Sounds fantastic to me.
So we talked last week, and then a couple of smaller trades happened. You know, an inherent benefit of being on the podcast as you talk through some of these things. Sometimes some of these ideas come up, and sometimes some of these deals get done. Let's see. Actually, I don't think we. Let's see. We didn't talk about one of these deals last time, so I got to scroll back a little bit to make fair with folks. Where was this?
We
Wasn't
did
the
not.
trade up? There was a deal I feel like last time we didn't talk about it, and somebody complained about it.
There. I believe it was the initial Odell Beckham trade, but I could be wrong about that.
You are correct.
Okay.
And for some reason, because that must have been when rollover happened. Got it. Um, okay, yeah. It was OBJ for, let me pull up the 2020 league home. The transactions, trades, last 300 days, go. It was. What the hell is this thing? God, a lot of stuff's happened since then, hasn't it?
Yes. Yeah. It's a whole different league since that trade happened.
Wow. All right. So this was February 3rd. So only 20 days ago, but Jesus, 30 trades have happened since then, and we've only been in a few of them. It was Odell Beckham for Von Miller, Denver's 21 second, and Denver's 22 second. So 201 Von Miller and Broncos 22 second for Odell. Which again, at the time, it was when Broncos was starting his spending spree of picks. I thought it was a really good pickup for him. I think Odell is going well below market value right now, and I obviously since I've traded for him, spoilers, I think he's worth well more than what got traded in that exchange.
Yeah, I agree. I think this was a case of just taking advantage of I don't want to call it a depreciating asset, but undervalued as far as perceived value.
Right. I think it's one of those that, again, everyone remembers what Odell was, and we've come a long way since. Is it 101 or Odell? Is Odell your 101 dynasty pick, like startup pick?
Right.
Like, we're not in those days anymore. But let's take a realistic look at this draft. We have Von Miller, who could or could not be in trouble with the law, may or may not play this season. If he does, it's been probably a couple of years since he's had a really healthy, productive season. So shelve himself as a player, but as a linebacker could produce something. So let's value him as maybe a second, just for shits and giggles. 201, a future second, and a player worth a second for, if he's healthy, a wide receiver one in this league.
Yep.
I think I do that I think I'd take a wide receiver every time, especially if we start at least, between 2 and 4 or 2 and 5.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it's a terribly lopsided trade. I think highly of Von Miller, mostly just because of that he's still with Denver. If he sticks with Denver, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's their coaching staff, if it's just a stroke of luck, but a lot of their linebackers and pass rushers of I don't want to say recent memory of the past 20 years, they've all been able to sustain some form of longevity, playing into their 30s. So I don't see it being a crazy idea that he does the same.
Yep. All right. So then moving to the seven trades that have happened since our podcast. The first one was between you and I. Getting out of Mostert, and the 325 for the 303, Bengals third, and then your fourth and fifth next year. Um, Obviously, you have begun the rebuilding process, and that's fair. A comment was made to me by an owner this last week about the fact that I think you bought Mostert for Jacksonville's first
I
at
did.
the deadline. So what I mean, obviously your plans have changed since then, trying to make a playoff run to trying to rebuild. But the question was, what made you decide this quickly that it was time to sell and sell now?
His age mostly. Acquiring him last year for that pick. Wasn't quite sure how that pick was going to turn out. I figured it was probably going to be lower to mid first. When I spent it on Mostert, I was looking for. It was almost an embarrassment of riches at running back, but I was looking for my fourth running back that could put up good points and be more than just an RB4. Be somebody that gives me double digit, maybe into the 20s, leading into the playoffs and through the playoffs. He ultimately didn't do that, and I think the change of the league year and the fact that he's 28 really diminished his value relatively quick. And I knew he was an he was a depreciating asset when I got him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, the rumors have already started. Aaron Jones to 49ers has started being rumored on a regular basis. Of course, Aaron Jones, to anyone who doesn't have a locked in number one running back right now, is kind of on the table at the moment. So we'll see what happens there. But not only does Mostert have to survive the offseason to keep his level of job that he was worth the first for last year, but he has to make it through training camp and he has to stay healthy, and that was a real big problem for him last year. So um, I'm excited by taking the shot on him. Obviously, I move down in the third and give up some um, later picks and get a shot at a fourth running back. Give myself, I guess, an embarrassment of riches at the position, but at the same time, I do recognize how this could go sideways on me pretty quick.
Yep. Um, basically, you had the same mindset that I did. I just paid more because I thought I was in the hunt, and unfortunately, you do see a lot of those. I'll pay a little bit extra right around the trade deadline just to try to take my team over the top. Uh, it didn't do that for mine, but it was an effort that was made.
Hey, and I traded a first last year for Chandler Jones, and he immediately got injured. So sometimes you do dumb things when you're trying to make that push.
Yep.
All right, next up, it's me again. I won't spend much or any time on this. Two fifths for Ashawn Robinson. Wanted a little bit of defensive tackle depth, and two fifths for that I felt was completely worth it for a shot in the dark like this, especially with him lined up next to Aaron Donald. Who knows what that ends up being?
He was one of the highest ranked interior linemen during the playoffs. He didn't play very much in the regular season. He was nursing injuries. But when he did get an opportunity in the playoffs, he looked like the Ashawn Robinson that was in Detroit.
So, hey, if he gives me a start, I think it's going to be worth it. But if he
Agreed.
doesn't, it's two fifths. I don't think I'm going to lose my mind here. And Panthers, he gets a few more picks to fill up the back end of his roster as he goes shopping.
Yep.
All right. Next trade wasn't a trade. It was the only tag that got accepted, I think. I picked up Harrison Smith from the Rams and gave him a 2-year deal. Like I said in the draft in chat earlier, by the way, like you guys keep making trades. I don't like talking about myself this much. But yeah, Harrison Smith. I think he's still got a couple years left as a top safety. That's kind of one of the holes in my team right now. I've got Micah Hyde. I've got um, Savage, but I wanted one more safety option to kind of give myself a little bit of depth. And Smith, that defense, he could still put up top safety numbers if again, I guess even if he stays healthy.
Yeah. Um, I'm I wasn't fond of Harrison Smith when he was 28. and it's been 4 seasons since then, and he's still been productive. So I think my opinion's pretty wrong on him, regardless of what it is. Like if it was negative, so I'm gonna stop doubting him and just expect him to be a productive safety like he's been.
Right. And I mean, I spent 231 last year, I think it was, on Justin Simmons. So picks for safeties, who knows? Maybe I'll couple him with a receiver I take in the first round this year and get a receiver who is a declining asset again. Seemed to work out for me well last year.
Yep.
All right. Next, a team not involving either of us. Falcons giving up Bengals 22 second for Kerry Willis. I will admit I don't know IDP as well as probably a lot of you guys.
Okay.
Kerry Willis, tell me more about him.
Good safety. Indianapolis is kind of just they have productive safeties, but they don't have the safeties that are established vets or consistent producers. So we've seen a lot of like in the past 4 or 5 years, a lot of like one consistent safety and then one just come out of nowhere. And Willis is kind of a little bit of both. I want to say more out of nowhere than anything because he wasn't
Mhm.
expected to be the productive rookie that he was, but he's kind of he's kind of carved out a role for himself. He's not a starting safety. He is the third safety in like a pseudo rotation. He plays a little bit of that nickelback position also.
Mhm.
So you'll see Blackman and Hooker get a lot of the run, but
Yep.
he's completely capable. He has a good build, so he's slightly undersized for a linebacker, but he can line up as a linebacker. I wouldn't expect it very often, but it will add to his tackle production.
Yep. Okay, cool. Yeah, so I guess the second rounder for that player is good, and Hooker has had trouble
Yep.
staying healthy the last couple of years. So,
At that age, I like it.
and I mean, assuming Falcons immediately goes ahead and extends him at that contract, since it looks like it was a 3-year deal, so can extend without having to renegotiate. So, not a bad thing to have a 24-year-old safety in that position for $500,000.
Right.
Although I guess he'd have. I think this was after the trade extension announcement. So hopefully he is posted that he's going to trade extend Willis. If not, hey, it won't be the first time the Falcons have had some trouble with extending the right players.
I mean, if not, he still has the opportunity of getting some type of a comp pick back. I wouldn't necessarily expect it to be a third, like your highest comp pick, but he likely will get a comp pick back if he doesn't extend him.
Yep. All right. Next two deals are kind of a three-way deal. So shocking. I was trying to move up in the draft. Again, everyone, please act surprised. So I'd actually sent an offer for the 102 and Beckham to Broncos that he'd rejected for Odell Beckham. So Odell Beckham 102 for Stafford 105 because it didn't make sense for Broncos team building strategy. And I get that. I mean, Stafford's an older quarterback. I could see not wanting to build him as your centerpiece, or hey, if I do this trade, then I now have to trade Stafford to somebody, and
Right.
who knows if he's going to get the same value I, got or otherwise for him. So it wasn't something he was interested in. However, what he was interested in was Patrick Mahomes. So he makes the deal with Matt to send Beckham, Anthony Barr, the 102, the 415, and Washington's 22 third for Mahomes in the 501. So basically, that immediately takes Odell in 102 and flips them to me for Matt Stafford in the 105. So really, Chargers broke down Mahomes and got back the 105, Matt Stafford, Anthony Barr, upgraded his 501 to 415 and a future third. So realistically, this breaks down to Stafford, Barr, and the 105 for Mahomes. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because I mean the future third is nice too, but Washington should be good, so that's likely going to be relatively late next year.
Right.
And then Broncos now has Pat Mahomes, so he will He's got 2 years left on that deal, so we'll likely extend him. That will not be cheap because he's likely to be right now in that upper echelon of quarterbacks on a point per game basis. Let me confirm. Actually, maybe he might be okay here. One last try. Actually, Mahomes is the number 4 quarterback, so he's a little bit cheaper than I thought. Not a lot, but if I double check the bylaws, I believe that means it's a 10% extension level. No, a 20% extension level versus a 25%. So maybe a shrewd move there. I don't know. Maybe I'm giving Broncos too much credit. Either way, he's got his quarterback of the now and the future pretty well locked up. Who's only 25 years old. So obviously a lot of building to do for Broncos, but quarterback is not going to be a position he has to build from. And if really Mahomes is his only big asset, he could end up with a high pick again next year and continue to build around Mahomes. So, like I said earlier, this is kind of leading into the team building conversation. But what were you thinking about Chargers, Broncos, myself in this deal, RJ?
So my first comment is I find great amusement in the fact that Matt gave Broncos so much shit about not knowing what he's trying to do this offseason in team building and then giving him Mahomes.
Mm-hmm.
Just makes it even more confusing.
Yep.
Not from my perspective, but like when you go, I don't know what this guy's doing, and then he goes, you know what? This guy has no idea what he's doing. I'm going to trade him the most valuable asset in this league. Production wise,
yes.
Like I find it very amusing. We break down the trades. I want to see what Broncos builds. I think like seeing a fleshed out team will ultimately go a long way into deciding if this trade for Mahomes was good or not. But he's already profited off of the 101. Now assuming the 102. He's doing well to accumulating picks, although he's only down to 129, 206, and 231 this coming year. So his stash of picks from last year is quickly dwindling, and I don't see the roster really forming yet. So I do look forward to seeing free agency, and not to say the assets that he didn't pick up were good, but it's 2 tight ends, a quarterback, an amazing safety, a linebacker, and still missing a lot of the necessary positions where you need a lot of depth.
Yeah, I mean, he's still probably 5 or 6 starters short, obviously. Considering he's got 13 players on his team, that goes without saying. But again, this is why it leads into that team building approach. And I think we can kind of talk about this. This is definitely a new one for me. I don't think we've seen this in the league before, where usually the rebuilds tend to be kind of, I'm going to completely blow it up. I'm going to completely get picks. And then if I buy things with my picks, that's it. I'm not trying to do this multiple years. It's what Washington did. It's what the Falcons did.
Right.
Basically turning a horde of picks into a competitive team, and then push them to division titles. Then you have the rebuild like I did, where it was literally tear it down to the studs, same kind of idea, but then build through the draft, and then again churn the draft picks, obviously, but primarily the builds happening through the draft. This, it looks like Broncos is kind of locking in players he wants to build around. Get Mahomes. I assume he probably will move one of those tight ends at some point. Maybe he doesn't, but he's got quarterback and tight end in a very good position for the long run because both those guys are pretty young and should have probably 5 or 6 productive years in front of them. Maybe 3 to 5. I'll be a little more conservative. Like you said, linebacking I like. And then the secondary is in a good position and good stuff for him to build on there. The challenge is needs DNs and needs offense. So he's not going to be able to find a lot of those in the player pool here. So it becomes, how does he use his cap? Does he continue to use this 115 million of cap room as a weapon, especially with a likely flat cap next year? Or does he get the opportunity to just outbid everybody on shorter contracts and put a strong enough team together to kind of finish middle of the pack? I don't think he's going to be able to win the West with this team yet, but he's got the pieces that if he's able to kind of manage his cap and manage the rest of his assets well this year, he's going to be very competitive next year.
Yeah, I agree. It's just like you said, it's a roster construction that we haven't typically seen with Falcons and Redskins. They ended up with a lot of really good assets on like offense, like specifically the like need positions, the positions where you're starting like more than one player, D end, wide receiver, things like that. They ended up either stumbling across a relatively cheap tight end, safety, quarterback, things like that, or finding one through the draft. A little bit more so about finding the undervalued ones. Broncos is taking like almost the opposite approach. Building around those positions that we talk about is like almost
your last piece.
Yeah. Like your tight ends are typically, like we've said multiple times, you typically see the higher the higher end tight ends on the top tier teams, because that's like the last piece that they need to acquire, or maybe a safety, something of that nature. I don't hate any single player on his team other than Alex Highsmith, because apparently I have some problem with him. Because I know I criticized that player last podcast, but other than that, I like everybody. Just KJ Hill at wide receiver terrifies me, because there's no quality wide receivers in free agency, and I really don't think that. What are the picks?
Let me look here. He's still got 117, 220, and then 4 fifth rounders.
Yeah.
So realistically, he's going to be able to add a piece on offense or a high-end defensive piece. A year-away guy in the 220s, and then 4 lotto tickets. I don't know if he has any comp picks coming. I don't think so.
I don't believe so.
So it's, again, I think you're 100% right. More to come, more to figure out in this one in terms of what builds around Mahomes. If he's able to, say, take Gesicki to one of these competing teams after they trade for Miami trades for Deshaun Watson, and Gesicki then gets moved for a first and a second next year, then I like this situation much better. If I was him, I would be like, hey, by the way, I was just kidding, Falcons. I really need that 119 back net, 109.
Yeah, I don't think I don't think either of us are necessarily shitting on the choices made. We're more intrigued to see how it's actually going to pan out, because we've seen other tried and true ways to tank and rebuild. This is just, I don't want to say a new one for this league, and I'm intrigued to see how it'll pan out.
And Mahomes does, if there's going to be a quarterback you do it with, it's Mahomes.
Yep.
Because again, he's 25 years old. So quarterbacks in this league, and again, hopefully he has success, and hopefully he has health to be able to do this, and he doesn't pull an Andrew Luck. Like, he could be on this team for 10 more years.
Right.
Like, realistically, again, 10 years is a very long time, especially in both the NFL and dynasty football. But in that case, if it takes him 2 years to kind of get the rest of the team built up around him, it's not like, oh, Mahomes is going to demand a trade because he's not competing for the playoffs. No, Mahomes doesn't give a shit. Like, okay, right. I'm on, the Broncos fantasy roster instead of the Chargers fantasy roster. It is what it is. So it's like I agree. This is by no means, dumping on the trade. It's excitement. I'm excited to see how this goes and kind of how this works and how this continues to change. Now, in 2 weeks, he may decide, screw it, I can move Mahomes to, say, Dallas for the 101 and other stuff. And, we're back at square one with this team. But it's kind of exciting to see a bit of innovation in the league here.
Yeah, I agree. The one thing that I hope doesn't happen, so we can actually see how it really pans out, is in 2 years. I hope he doesn't trade away Mahomes because he's just bored of seeing that name on the roster. I see a lot of that in Dynasty,
Yep.
where somebody's still like a really good, like relatively young for their position, and somebody just has had them for 3, 4 years, and they're just like, I don't know. I guess they're not, and you almost like, the grass is always greener on the other side. They always undervalue their players after viewing them for a long time.
Right. And maybe like, or if it's something like, okay, I'm one or two pieces away and somebody's giving me, instead of an elite quarterback like Mahomes, a good quarterback, like, I'll use Matt Stafford as an example because I'm simple. Like
Right.
Matt Stafford, good, like a good running back, like a running back one in his like 25 years old, something like that, and a good wide receiver. Like
Right.
if you got a package like that kind of says, okay, this lets me round out the rest of my team, but I have to go from Mahomes to a Stafford level player.
Right.
Like that's the other thing I could see happening. But again, like if he sticks with it, Mahomes being the guy to build around and builds around him, it'd be really fun to see what happens.
Agreed.
Because again, he put up 440 points, and I don't think it was 100% of all of last year. So 500
Yep.
points is not out of you know the realm of possibility for Mahomes here. And I think that might have outscored Broncos' entire team last year.
Probably.
So, all right, and then from the Matt perspective, he continues his getting younger-ish churn, breaking down Mahomes into Stafford, Barr, and the 105. So we'll get a top five pick if he doesn't churn that out. And then Stafford. Again, I like Stafford. I think he's on a really good contract, in a good situation with the Rams, but obviously he's no Mahomes. So this seems to be the continued view by Matt of let me kind of churn some pieces out, let me get a little younger here and inject some youth around my team and try and maintain around the top of the West as the Raiders, as the Chiefs, and eventually the Broncos start nipping at his heels.
Yep. Um, he turned Mahomes into what could potentially be two good quarterbacks. I don't want to say productive yet because that pick still has to be picked, and ultimately that player has to produce in the league. Um, but yeah, I like it. I like breaking down Mahomes for that. Um, I probably wouldn't have. I probably would have hung on to Mahomes forever, because I probably would have overvalued him. So I tip my hat to him just in that sense for at least taking the shot of moving him, um, because I think he's the type of player that a lot of people would ultimately overvalue and just hold on to forever.
Right. And again, Matt's team was kind of built for a player like Mahomes, to be honest. Let me pull that up here, just
Well,
to.
that's the fun thing about it. His team was built for Mahomes, but just imagine having a cheaper quarterback with an extra 32 million to keep buying those undervalued assets like he's accumulated.
Well, yeah, he's got 40 million in older defensive ends. He's basically said, "I'm going to spend all my money on my defense and go with young, high upside players on offense, and kind of keep the powder dry because defense is going to be easier for me to acquire in free agency, which we've seen is definitely true." So it's a completely different makeup because I think, hey, I've got the expensive quarterback and I'm cheap at every other position. And if you know who you're looking for, you can find those free agency things. I agree. I probably would have held on to Mahomes, but nobody believes me because I probably would have traded Mahomes away 2 weeks from now anyway. So um, he's one of those guys that you have to pay up to get, and I never like paying up to get those players, especially in a league like this.
Right. Yeah, I mean when you look at the Chargers roster, Tyree Cleveland, Latrell, I don't even know his name, and a linebacker from Denver are the only three like nobodies on the team, and everybody else is, you know, top 64 at their position. Maybe not Richie James, but he gets some return looks. But everybody else has a built-in role on their team, and it doesn't look like, other than JJ Watt, any of them are really going to be changing teams. Christian Kirksey got cut, but that was kind of expected.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really good team, and it's built very well. If you would have looked at it 3 years ago, there were all these different overpriced players at different positions, and Amari Cooper. I don't think there was ever an expensive running back. There might have been, but he's done a great job of just turning everything into like sub $10 million studs.
Yep. All right. So speaking of continued team building, we've got another strategy here with this last trade that hats off to him because he does this in, I want to say, most every league I've been in with, and he does it every single year. And I would say hopefully it turns out better for him this year, but I really don't because he's in my division. The Packers. So the last couple of years, he's been kind of in the wild card competition in the NFC North. And last year having some injury problems kind of blew it up a little bit. But Jeremy's cycle is almost always try and compete, which again is a good strategy. Trying to win is always a good strategy. But then he'll get to an inflection point, like 5 or 6 weeks in, where he's either all in or all out. And in this case, he was all out. So it was
Right.
Fournette's gone. Rodgers is gone. Just moving assets out, whatever picks he could get, whatever injured or future assets he could get, get them out the door. Don't need them. And then immediately in the offseason say, okay, I'm trying to win again. So one of those assets he got for breaking down Rodgers was Tua Tagovailoa from me, who he's now flipped for Lamar Jackson, a second and a third rounder, which is fascinating to me because Tua, again, has the confidence, I guess, of the Miami head coaches, but is not the same bulletproof prospect we thought of last year. And in exchange for him, he gets a second and third round pick plus Lamar Jackson. Yes, Lamar Jackson is about to get a whole lot more expensive. Let's not be silly season here. He's going to be cheap this year. He's going to be cheap next year. And then he's going to be really expensive. So you got 2 years of $3 million or less quarterback play before he's got to pay him. So it's not bad, but it's worth a consideration. Considering some of the other players like Cortland Sutton or others on the team, it's something that he's going to keep track of. But shit, now he's got Lamar, he's got Chubb, he's got Kupp, and I think he's got one other pretty good receiver. Like his team's coming back together pretty strong here. I still feel good about doing well in the North this year, but Jeremy's not going to let me run away with it. You bastard.
No, I like this trade for the Packers. Tua. So you said Tua has the confidence of the coaching staff, but apparently his teammates have no confidence in him, from what I'm hearing. That's neither here nor there. He's probably going to end up I don't want to say not being productive. He's going to end up being productive in some capacity. I just don't know what. Probably like a 3,000 yard, somewhere in the low 20s touchdowns. He's not going to set the league on fire, but he's also not going to be terrible. Lamar Jackson is Lamar Jackson. If you're one of the people that constantly harps on the thought of him getting injured, then you probably didn't like it. If you're like me, that constantly gets annoyed by the only negative about him is that is a potential injury that has yet to happen, then you think very highly of him. because I just I don't like I'm not gonna live in fear of a potential injury. Like he's a stud quarterback. Yeah,
I live in fear of the Falcons. So something that I've learned in my years is to be wary of the Falcons, especially when he's backed up by a beer quilt.
oh, hey, I like it.
That's Katie. That's Mrs. Falcons, Dr. Falcons.
Dr. Falcons,
Dr.
seriously,
Falcons.
come on, you're better than this.
Trying to get myself in deep shit here.
Yeah, don't do that. That never turns out well for anybody. But welcome, Brett. Just joining us on the pod here. Had some quality time spent with the wife first, so making the right choice there. So we're going through some of the recent deals. We're at the one from this morning of the Tua and Lamar swap, and been talking about kind of team building strategies as we go. So you've seen Jeremy in quite a few leagues here, and is he as successful with this year in year out cycle of going all in, then rebuilding in the off season, and then going all in again?
Let's see. How many actual leagues am I in with Jeremy? I don't know that I'm in that many that are running. I mean, my longest running league at this point is 5 years, and he is not in that one. So I think we're in a couple that are a little newer, but not that have been going long enough to see, how he rides those waves. But I don't know. I don't know that the deal from this morning was as much about trying to go all in again as it was being scared about Tua and trying to get value for Tua and feeling like that was good value.
Well, I also hate getting a top 5 quarterback for a player I'm scared about. Like, it's a really tough position to be in. I feel really bad.
Plus some extra picks.
Yeah. So again, there's a lot of shooting on Giants here, mostly because, we shoot on you if we like you. And there's a clear plan that Giants has started executing here. It's building around the younger players and swapping out guys like Beckham for, maybe a little bit less than he thought he could be able to get for him, but, still be on the right side of what he needs to build his team up probably for next year. This probably means Zeke Elliott is available. So any of you guys who still need a running back, go hit him up. But it's leading to a pretty well-built combination of youth and picks that he can continue to kind of form this into next year. So he's now building around, and again, a lot of these items look familiar because they were on my team last year.
Isn't that like, okay, in fairness, when you trade as often as you do, you've had half the players in the league on your team at one point or another. So everybody's got players from your team.
Yeah, that's fair. If you don't, let me know and we'll fix that.
You have no idea how fun it is to tell all the new owners in the league, or like when they first make their first offer to you, send them a list of like, these are the players that I've owned from your roster in the past 365 days. I can't reacquire them. Have fun figuring this out.
Yeah, although this has now put Giants in a good situation. I think there's only 2 players so that's the thing. You can reacquire in the last 365 days. You just can't directly reacquire.
This is why Mike needs 3-way trades now.
No, that's what I'm saying. Like talking to the new owners, just going, hey, I had traded with your previous owner and these are the players, so I can't make these moves with you.
That would be an interesting bylaw stipulation that if a team changes ownership, that you rescind that limitation on swapping players back and forth if it's not the same owners.
I don't like it. You'd have somebody trying to buy back things for, pennies on the dollar, and somebody
especially with a new owner.
Yeah.
I mean, look,
just popped into my head.
I love the idea because there are some players that I would love to go out to the new owners and reacquire for like proper value. But ultimately, I think it would end up with somebody like screwing somebody else over.
Yeah.
I mean, as far as the Tua L-Jax deal, I mean, I don't think that everybody was on the Lamar Jackson side. I think Matt and the chat on Discord was surprised that because Matt doesn't want to pay a quarterback, 35, 40 million, and anything to avoid paying a quarterback that amount of money is something that he's interested in. So I think that, the Tua on his rookie contract and cheap is something that seems extremely attractive.
Yeah, and again, assuming he bounces back. MFL projection is what, for 3,000 yards throwing, 20 touchdowns, plus 230 yards and 5 on the ground. Like, that's probably QB 17, 15 numbers, like middle of the pack. So the price is definitely right. Now it's just a question of what does he get for Zeke, especially after last year. And then taking a quick look at the Giants picks.
Well, Zeke is another example of a price locked player, which is kind of a big deal.
Yeah. And for the rest of his career, he's going to be a good price lock player. So let's see. Giants now have the 112 and 3 second-round picks, and then a 5th-round flyer. So, again, that'll be good for him to build with. I think, he's likely going to be a team that goes heavy for 2022 picks to, finish filling out his team. But again, it's another one of those that's a work in process, and it's a slightly different. It's a really slow teardown that he's been doing. It was really going on for the better part of last year, and while he was doing that, he was accumulating points, and now is the 12th pick instead of being higher. But he's got Andrews, he's got Tua, he's got an intriguing defense. It's. He's a few pieces away, but it's tough to see the team ever getting bad enough to get the pieces he needs.
Well, but the piece that you need to be bad enough to get is at quarterback, and he doesn't need to worry about that. He's got 3 years before he needs to worry about being bad enough to get his quarterback.
Or he needs to get that pick to be able to flip for multiple pieces in that round, then get the quarterback next year. So again, we're talking about different team building things. I've now had, top 2 picks for the last 3 years. And usually what's happened is I'll take that quarterback, I'll flip him, or I'll trade down from that pick to get multiple shots at the apple. And then, go from there and kind of build things out. And that seems to have worked for me. So it's just a different approach here of how far do you build the team before you get that quarterback? Or, who knows? Tua could be moving again, and it could be another way for him to get into the top 10. Like if he went to Colts and offered him Tua for the 106, like Tua is going to be a better quarterback than he's going to have a shot at. Otherwise, he's reaching for like Mac Jones or something, and is he might be able to get him to add to the 106 for that. So who knows? A lot of time between now and draft day.
I would encourage everybody in the first 8 picks to take quarterbacks.
I think Broncos wants that 109 back. You should probably give that back to him.
I tried. I tried.
I know. I this is not me giving you shit. This is not me, making you the bad guy. This is truly a the Broncos. I think you should really get that 109 back. Because I hope they come out of the NFC at one of these years.
I mean, it is going to get tough as far as team building goes because enough people have figured out that there's no point in being in that pick, 10, 12 range. If you're not a playoff team, you might as well be terrible and try and get yourself a top first. So you have guys like Broncos and Cowboys that are figuring out, but you had a bunch of teams this year that tanked pretty aggressively and will continue to tank pretty aggressively to try and get those top picks. And, that makes it really tough to be a middle of the road team and try and retool and reload when, you're going to be stuck with the 14th pick because so many teams are willing to just throw it all away. And you can't have, even with 32 teams, you can't have that many people aggressively tanking at once.
Yeah. No, and it's going to be a question of, and this is kind of how I see Broncos' path, is he's got $115 million in cap space. He still has a couple of picks left. If he can churn some of these picks into 2022s or whatever, and then go shopping with that, he can probably pick up some good starters on the cheap that fill that team out to a point where now he's in the wild card race. Because that's the other aspect of this is if there's 10 teams tanking, then there's 22 teams trying to make the playoffs for 14 seeds. So that only means 8 aren't going to make it. And you get a bonus, and I think you don't get paid out until you make the second round, right? The championship.
Yep.
But you get an extra extension and a couple benefits for winning your division. So it's one of those where I applaud him for staying in the thick of it and realizing that if everyone else is tanking, then you're against the skid and maybe buy some things for this. But you need capital to buy things, and it's tough to buy all the pieces you need with just one first rounder here.
Well, especially when you're paying up for Pat Mahomes.
True. All right, so those are the trades. What we wanted to do now is kind of start going through 2 of the divisions here and talk about where they are in their rebuilding or competing process. Are they buyers? Are they sellers? Is this going to be their year? Are they tearing things down? What do they look like from a pick perspective? Stuff like that. So we'll go ahead and start with the AFC North. Why? Because we're 3 NFC teams, and we shouldn't talk about ourselves too much on these podcasts until we are fully forced to. So the North. Let's talk about the Steelers. Former Commissioner Lewis's team. Kyle's had this team for the last 2. Famous for the Fournette trade last year, which was almost omniscient in terms of what ended up happening with Fournette, or could see the future. I forget the big word for it at the moment, but is in an unenviable position of having some big assets he's trying to move, but unfortunately those assets keep depreciating faster than he can move them.
Yeah, Sammy Watkins on a nice $19 million contract. Like, what do you do with that?
You got to cut him.
Mm-hmm.
Like even if he signs someplace, nobody's going to trust him at $19 million. Or if they trust him, you're going to get maybe a 4th for him.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one of those where I probably would have cut him before rollover to get myself the extra cap savings this year. But in this case, you got to probably hold him until you see what happens with free agency, and then if it doesn't go someplace you like, you got to cut him.
I mean, does he really need the cap space? He's probably not competing this year, right? He's got $72 million in cap space, but
I think he's one of those players that we'll probably see get moved right around the trade deadline for what we'd assume is like a very low price for the player, but with the contract, he'll be thankful for whatever. Like, he'll be happy with whatever he gets, just to get that contract off the books for him. And whoever gets him will be happy to have him for a playoff push.
Right.
It's hard for me to imagine any playoff team being able to scrounge up the $19 million in cap space.
Well,
especially when you consider what free agency prices are going to look like.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So it'll be a scenario like one team has a $15 million wide receiver that has put up relatively no points, and they will send that player to the Steelers along with like a 4th and a 5th, or maybe a 3rd and a 4th to acquire this player. It's not going to be a straight up like pick for player type of deal.
Yep.
I mean, if you're Steelers though, why aren't you just hell? I mean, let me buy some more bad contracts and get some late picks for them, because does Steelers really view themselves as competing for the division?
Well, I mean, there's a path, but not an easy one. He has the 110, and as you've mentioned with the 109, that's going to be a very interesting situation to be in, especially if we see quarterback go off on the first 5 picks or so.
Yep.
So if that's the case, then he's looking at potentially a top level running back. He also has the 125 and 210. So if he swapped the 125 for a good starting receiver, and I think he could definitely get a late wide receiver 1, early wide receiver 2 from the right team for that. Take the running back, 1 or 2, probably or 3, probably 2, I'd say at 10. You got Trey Burton, who never mind, he's kind of fallen off. Yeah, I would blow it up, but there's a walking the wire path to try and make this a playoff team.
Yeah, it's just an uphill climb when the safer path is probably continuing to punt for another year, in which case a contract like the Watkins contract doesn't really matter. But then do you continue to hold Matt Ryan if you're not trying to compete this year? Or do you try and do what Giants has done? I mean, obviously it's not the same situation because it's a much older quarterback, to try and move it for a pick or find somebody younger.
I think, unfortunately, he's missed the window on Ryan.
Yep.
I don't think it's the price tag that's the issue with. I think Chris did the math. There's like $2 billion of cap space available, right? So teams have the space available to take on someone like that. But to your point, there are enough teams tanking that, it doesn't make sense necessarily to do that. Like, again, if he didn't buy Minshew from me, would the 132 have been able to get Matt Ryan from Pittsburgh? That makes the Patriots look like a completely different team.
People weren't even willing to bid for Kirk Cousins, right? So,
which again upsets me because I wanted to bid for him, but I didn't have the cap space. But anyways, I digress. Continuing on with Steelers, though. Defense, and again, if he breaks it down, and I think we agree he probably should. This is probably a seller. Ryan is interesting. Allen Lazard is interesting. Defense, Eric Armstead. Will the team give a second, considering the value of DN in this league? You have a very cheap Jordan Brooks contract, and then Budda Baker. Someone's going to give you a first for Budda Baker, at least. So I would go shopping with Ryan, with Baker, with Lazard, and with Armstead, and see if I could walk away with 2 future firsts, 2 or 3 future firsts, and 2 future seconds. I think is a reasonable haul for what he's got there, and then immediately start using my cap space as a weapon.
Mm-hmm. Agree.
Yep. All right.
So that's your future. That is your 2021 Super Bowl winner, Steelers, right there.
Absolutely. Considering we say he should completely blow it up and build for the future, he's absolutely winning it all this year. All right. So let's move on to new owner Brett taking this team over. I've talked a lot this podcast. Who wants to kind of go through this team and get their thoughts first?
We're talking about Browns, right?
Right.
All right. So I talked to the previous Browns owner quite a bit. So, and he always bounced ideas off of me. And I'd like to think in my mind that I helped build this team a lot, or at least helped flesh it out. It's a really good roster. He's made good moves since he took over, by mostly just not tearing it apart and taking the time to assess the actual value of players and understand it. I really like this team, and I think he has the 129, the 206, and the 231. So I don't know if he necessarily needs to use those picks, actually take a player, or just turn them into productive veterans. I'd like to see him acquire a good running back, and probably, ideally more cornerbacks, but he'll probably just acquire those in free agency. Maybe like a high-end linebacker, if he can package maybe both of those seconds for a really good but slightly overpriced linebacker. That would be great. This team doesn't need much tinkering. It's kind of like built to compete. Just in a year where Michael Thomas plays all 16 games.
Yeah, I think that. The thing that sucks for Browns, that the AFC North is an extremely competitive division. The Browns, the Ravens, and the Bengals are all pretty good teams. So that I mean, the additional wild card now, 3 wild cards really helps. But I guess the only thing that really confused me that the new owner did was using his renegotiation on Russell Wilson instead of on Michael Thomas to cut Michael Thomas's contract in half. That was the only thing that really surprised me. But I mean, if he can pick up a running back and get some points at that position, I think the rest of his offense week to week is pretty solid. He's got, I mean, defensive end is such a position of need that the 3.5 guys that he has on rotation there are better than most teams are going to have at that position. So he should definitely be competitive week to week, and there's no reason why he can't win the division. I mean, I think it's a pretty uphill climb against probably Bengals, just with Bengals' IDP depth. But I mean, I think, it's a well put together team.
Yeah, and I did not realize that about Thomas. I thought he was much higher on a point per game basis than he was. So good call there, although it's never bad having Russell Wilson locked down for the long haul.
Yeah.
But I don't think he saved as much on a Wilson renegotiation. Than
I think he saved $2.5 million on Russell Wilson. And he used an extension on Deshaun Elliott, Baltimore safety. So it's like, just let the safety walk and use a regular extension on Wilson and use the renegotiation on Michael Thomas.
Yep, I agree with that.
If it's me, but
so I do like throwing hypothetical trades out there. If he takes his 129 and a 206, and you know what, the 231 as well, let's just kind of make it simple. Does that get him Zeke Elliott?
Most likely.
I mean, I don't know why Giants would hold him. I mean, that's an asset that's going to continue to trend down the longer you hold it. So,
right. So Zeke had a $10 million contract on this team. Would it give him the running back he needs to kind of like this team gets scary with a guy like Zeke on it.
Yeah, I agree.
So again, even on trades I'm not involved in, guys, come on, more things for us to talk about.
This is not a football podcast. This is a matchmaking podcast.
Yes, disguised as a fantasy football podcast.
This guy is, as a fantasy football podcast about a specific league, even though the streaming account is for another league, but I digress. All right, let's move on to the other competing team that you had mentioned here, the Ravens. Traded into the 101 last year, and then started trading future assets to make his team competitive last year, and did a pretty damn good job of it, I would say.
Yeah.
He's got, again, a number of holes. I don't think he's ready to make a run at the title yet, but definitely surprised some teams, especially being in the playoff race so early. The Burrow injury kind of killed him, but this team is on the right track and not too far away from really giving Bengals and Browns some trouble.
Yeah, I agree. When you look at specifically the IDP side of it, I don't think he's too far off of Bengals. Like I do think Bengals is slightly better, but I don't think there's a major discrepancy in how good both of their defenses are. His secondary's amazing for like the players that he has. His linebackers are, I don't want to say perfect.
Devin White and then.
Right. And Devin White is basically 2 linebackers. Right. He's a pass rushing linebacker giving you 9 sacks a season, plus a premier tackle producer giving you 120 plus combined tackles. Mm-hmm. So that's fantastic. All you need is like other people with a pulse to put up more than 0 points, and your linebackers are still fantastic. Defensive end is lacking in depth, but like I'm not gonna spit at somebody that has Everson Griffin on the roster. He is a good player. He's in a spot where I believe he's appreciated now, so he should be pretty good.
Yeah, Brett, anything to add?
He's got a late first, and I think that wide receiver is definitely where he should be looking to make some moves because his wide receivers are just pretty thin and nobody really jumping off the page in me. And getting James Robinson. So I think Broncos drafted James Robinson with a 5th. And I think during preseason or late in preseason, Ravens picked him up for a 2nd.
Yep.
And that was a hell of a move.
Yeah.
In retrospect. I think, you have 30 other owners that would just give up a 2nd in a heartbeat for him.
Yep. I mean, we didn't know what James Robinson was, so like hindsight, like that was probably one of the better trades made last year.
Mm-hmm.
But I think even at the time, just knowing that he was going to be the starting running back in Jacksonville, that was still a good value. So that's a fantastic trade that at no point ever looked like a bad trade.
And picking up Ertz, I think he did somewhat recently, picking up that Ertz contract. That's the only trade that I looked at that I scratched my head at.
It wasn't
recently. Go ahead.
Yeah, it wasn't like one of those type of trades where I thought it was terrible value. I'm not necessarily on the Ertz train, but if anybody else believes in like his proven production, great trade.
Yeah, I think it just depends a lot about what
Whether
happens.
You're an Ertz guy.
Yep, it's the context for the trades, and like that, especially in this league, it really that really matters. Because a team like Ravens, which is looking to get better and looking to compete against somebody that's already brought home a title, like sometimes you might have to slightly overpay just to know that you've like sealed up that one position and now you can focus on other positions.
Yep. I think that makes some good sense. All right. Let's run on the division. We'll make this. Nobody likes talking about Chris anyway.
I mean, he's rolling out Jeff Driscoll at quarterback, please.
Yeah, I mean, this team's going to be pretty competitive. Only risk is with the 103. What does it end up being at quarterback this year? Obviously, this is a team who needs a starter right now. Likely, you'll get at least 3 starters out of this draft in terms of quarterback position, and he'll just take probably the last one, or he'll move that for somebody more proven. But again, with $66 million in cap space and the 103, he literally can go shopping for anybody, short of probably 2 or 3 quarterbacks, and he's going to be an AFC favorite this year.
Yep.
What else is new?
I want to see what that pick's ultimately going to be before I can say, yes, he's going to be back in the driver's seat of that division, because that is a very important position. But yeah, didn't he win the championship with Trubisky?
He did.
Okay, so he could take a running back with that 3rd pick and find some guy that's going to put up 1 or 2 points. Maybe a $30+ million Taysom Hill, and probably still be a contender.
I mean, the gauntlet's been thrown down here, Chris. Can you win the title with a $30 million Taysom Hill as your quarterback instead of the 103? If you really think you're that good, then you should probably offer the 103 to the Seahawks and see what happens.
No, don't do that.
I mean, you should. If you think you're that good of a fantasy owner, you should definitely do that. And I'm hoping he started drinking by the time he hears this podcast, so that he either curses me out or decided
the amount of alcohol it would take, he'd be blackout drunk and physically unable to click the button.
Well, just know if he tags himself in the group chat to process a trade, something weird's happened.
I mean, that's usually.
I mean, there haven't been any mid-podcast trades yet, which is always a little disappointing.
I have a couple of them that I'm sitting on that I've been waiting to accept. All weekend I was never near my computer for more than 10 minutes.
Here, hold on a second. Oh yeah, no, I see an offer that I sent you.
We even discussed it, and then midway through that discussion, I was busy again, and I was off.
Right. Well, I mean, we're about to switch divisions, so if you'd like to pause to make a mid-podcast trade, we can do that.
It's peer pressure. I don't need him to accept a trade like that, Mike.
I mean, considering what Brett did to our poor Broncos owner and peer pressuring him into trading the 109,
RJ, if you need to reverse the trade, I would be thrilled to reverse the trade after you accept it.
Oh,
look at this
no.
reverse psychology.
I've sent some awful trades and just dealt with them before. So if I accept a bad trade, that's on me.
All right, fine. You guys are being way too nice about things. Let's move to the AFC South. And we'll start with the Houston Texans. Another new owner here, I think. Jeff, not taking over a bad position here. I think this was a playoff team last year with strong performance from Allen as well as receiver depth. Roquan Smith was definitely not a bad player to have. And then David Johnson showing up just enough to get him into the postseason. Again, should be a good team again. Just needs to find a running back.
Did you say Texans is a new owner?
Yeah.
I think I might need to offer him all of my assets but my first pick next year for Josh Allen. So you guys can have that conversation while I click a whole bunch of boxes and send that trade offer over.
Hey, mid podcast trades. I like it. Brett, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really interested, after the third Corey Davis, second Corey Davis renegotiation. I'm really interested to see where he lands. David Johnson is aging, but presumably still the starter next year. His linebackers are pretty good. I mean, it's still a competitive team, easily.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got $62 million in cap space. What does he have for picks? Picks.
Before 32, and that's it.
Well, not a lot going to be happening there. So
I mean, he might get some comp picks. I'm not sure. I haven't taken a look at everybody's comp pick situation, and we'll see what that kind of does. But again, those aren't necessarily big game changers.
What are you getting for comps, Mike? I know you know what you're getting.
Yeah, I think I'm getting like the 333 or 334.
How do we determine the which third round pick you get?
I think it's in order of who gets comp picks and then what your draft order is. So obviously, if Broncos got a comp pick, he'd get 333. But then it's kind of go through and you do them in order that way. Then you fourth and then fifth and stuff like that. I believe that's how the bylaws have it called out. If either of the commissioners would like to take this opportunity to tell me I'm wrong and inform the league of what it actually is, then by all means.
Well, then I will very much enjoy closing out the third round.
Most.
So, Colts?
All right. Let's talk about the Colts.
Let's talk about Mitchell Trubisky.
I did send an offer for Trubisky involving Stafford before I settled on the one I had here.
I still can't believe you traded Stafford.
We'll get to that. Actually,
You've already covered it. I'm late for that. I'll have to keep it to myself, except for that.
We'll talk about it. We'll talk about it off air. So a lot's going to depend on whether Trubisky keeps his job or whether he is replaced in Chicago. And if so, then that's not a great contract to have. But again, Colts is in the rebuild. But I think that's a decision that's going to drive a lot of his offseason. Because if he has a quarterback, he can use, I think it's the 106, to kind of start rebuilding. If not, then this needs to be a move the 106 and 123 for 2022 assets and hit the full reset button this year.
Yeah,
but I feel like he may be stuck taking a quarter. I mean, he can hit a full reset and still probably hope with the additions that the teams in front of him are going to take, hope to have a higher than 106 pick next year and get a quarterback. So he doesn't have to go with a quarterback this time. But I mean, whoever he takes is going to be adding points on. But and even if Trubisky ends up somewhere where he's presumably the starter, which I have a hard time believing, how long are you going to expect that to be the case?
Well, I mean, that's the thing. With 106, he's realistically looking at probably either the running back one, the wide receiver one or two, Pitts, or like
or he's
Mac
going,
Jones.
Or Lance or something like that.
Yeah, if Lance is still there. But again, he's in a situation that he's got a lot of options. So I think with those many players potentially on the board, that's going to be a very valuable pick, especially if Edwin hammers quarterback the first couple. So with that being the case, I think if I'm him, I'm moving this pick to move down. Say the Panthers want to move up from 111. Let me see if I can acquire picks to move down, and then let them kind of figure out whether they're taking a skill player or quarterback or whatever with their pick. So I think this pick gets moved, and he kind of blows up to go full rebuild. That said, I don't think I've seen Chris really go full rebuild ever. So this will be a new one for me.
Yeah, he got stuck in a bad situation with Trubisky getting benched last year. So it made his tank like terrible. Just because he already had a couple of wins under his belt. He's got a good amount of picks. If he can, like you said, if he can move them to next year's draft for just a larger amount of picks, maybe some younger players that he can stash, I like it.
And he's already got 222 firsts, seconds, thirds, fourths.
Yep. So yeah, from what he's done, just kind of keep doing it. I'm interested to see what that 106 will be. Like, what player will be available when that clock starts.
Right. And again, that's the thing. The draft really starts at 4 this year because Cowboys traded up to get 101. We know what he's probably doing. Both Chris and I, if we hang on to 102 and 103, need quarterbacks. So we know what we're doing. Seahawks is at 4. It's really completely up in the air. Take the 4th quarterback? Does he take the first skill position player? Does he trade out? What does he do? And then kind of taking it back from there. So he's going to be in a real situation. And again, Matt with 105 has Stafford. So likely win skill position or moving out of that. So 104 is where the draft really starts, and you can go any of what directions. Like last year, I thought I had a pretty good idea what the draft was going to look like for at least the top 10. I don't know.
Yeah, I want to think I know what's going to happen with the first 5, but you are correct. It starts at 4. 1, 2, and 3 are I don't want to say like they're a given, but we can expect what's going to be taken at 4. Yeah, that's when you can start arguing the skill position players being a better value than the leftover quarterbacks.
Yeah.
But when you have Taysom Hill as your starting quarterback,
you have the highest floor in the league with Taysom Hill at quarterback. So you're gonna do great. You're never gonna score exactly 0 points at quarterback, but you're probably gonna never score more than like 7 or 8. So just make the rest of those positions, exceptional. Have the number 1 scorer at every position. And I think you could put together a championship team.
We joke, but let me just check and see where Taysom finished last year in terms of point per game.
Well, I mean, the question is he the starter or not?
Right.
And I think everybody assumes that he's not. But if he is.
If Breeze is gone, I do assume that he's the starter. I don't that doesn't make him wildly valuable to me. It certainly makes him more valuable than a backup Taysom Hill, but still not 30+ million.
So Hill,
the price point is always going to be ridiculous.
Yeah, he was a late 30. So obviously, he needs to get renegotiated this year.
Can't.
I know.
A 1-year contract.
Joking.
Okay, well, I don't know that. We got new owners there listening, man.
Yeah, don't give the new owners any bad ideas, like trying to win the championship with Taysom Hill.
Hey, you know what? If anybody could, I think Bengals Chris probably could. It would really show us that he's a better owner than the rest of us. So clearly, it's a challenge that after winning the league once, he needs to take on if he's going to try and win this league again. I'm just saying. All right, moving on. Let's talk about the Jags. Traded their first away this year in a move that puzzled all of us last year. thinking, what is he doing? This is going to turn out terribly. And Derrick Henry turned out to have just a pretty okay year.
Mm-hmm.
But now with no first, luckily Wentz has a starting job still. Still has Henry. Good pieces, but needs to build things out quick, fast, and in a hurry.
Yep, really good assets. Window is diminishing very quickly. It seems like more of a throw everything you have to build the best possible roster and hope for the best rather than try to tear it down and get a premium for everybody.
Although it would be interesting if, say, the owner with the 109 offered it for Derrick Henry and maybe, I don't know, another piece with that 109. Would they do that? I mean, I don't think that owner needs help at the running back position, but considering where things are, if you make that move, you kind of open things up a little bit for yourself in terms of building because a lot of his pieces like Bosa, like Wentz, like Chark and Slayton shouldn't be kind of at the peak of their value, but Henry certainly is.
Yeah. I mean, Henry for 109 kind of fits our current champs method, right? That's a yes, I'm gonna assume. And
I will be happy to sell that pick. Although I think if I were to, I would prefer to trade it for a nice wide receiver starter.
That's fair.
But yeah, I'd kind of flip a coin whether or not. I mean, it's either with the quarterbacks, I'm expecting to go 109 is either going to be a top 2 running back, top 3 wide receiver, or Pitts. I mean, some grouping of those players is going to be there. But I'm competitive, so I'm also happy to sell it. So I'd kind of flip a coin as to whether or not I do that. And I think Jags was only like a half an hour in doing his extensions, a half an hour before the timer expired on Valentine's Day. So Henry was just this close to going down to 1 year and being available for a nice trade extension or having to get tagged.
Would have been disastrous.
Yeah, it's a backbreaker.
I think this is the type of team that kind of shows us that what I had joked about previously, building a really good team with a really bad quarterback might not really be possible because he has some really good assets, just and a reasonable quarterback, and it's still just a 500 team.
Right. And again, if the Steelers can't get off Matt Ryan with a first, it's going to be tough to move Wentz for first. So it's one of those where it's like you almost have to hold and hope Wentz turns the career around. You're able to kind of continue to build around Wentz in the long term. Or hey, maybe the hype and being in Indy is enough to kind of get that move here for him going forward because he's already traded his first. But again, I think Henry appreciated value over what his first would have been this year.
Yeah, I agree with that. Last year, I felt it was really easy to move quarterbacks because it felt like 26 of the 32 starters were at least being discussed as franchise quarterbacks for their teams. Now it seems like no team has confidence in their quarterback, or they are an aging quarterback. So the best way you're going to get value out of a quarterback in our league is trading them into the hype. So when their name is in the headlines, move them.
Yep. All right. Last but not least, we have the Tennessee Titans, new owner Luigi, who has quickly made this team his own. Maintained Kirk Cousins on the franchise tag. Pretty solid running back room led by Christian McCaffrey. Pretty solid receiver room led by Julio Jones. And I'd say middle of the road defense. So would this team compete in the North? Probably not. Will this team compete in the South? I think so.
I don't like that defense at all. I love a lot of the older assets, like on the offense, and I'm I'm quite fond of some of the younger assets, but that defense is just terrible. Those
I
are all
mean, when
players.
you pull 4 starters from the defensive ends and linebackers week to week.
Yeah.
I mean, the AFC South seems like a cakewalk for the Texans to me again.
Yeah, but again, it's going to be. I would not be
Although we're
surprised.
sleeping on AJ Dillon, though.
I would not be surprised if the Titans were able to, again, because of playing the Colts and Jags, if they stretch together, 9 wins and have a shot at a wild card. But I agree, it's Texans and everyone else here.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's fair. I mean, the wild card in the AFC is certainly a little more attainable than it is in our conference. And there's some guys that, I mean, Pittman should hopefully bump up in year 2. I mean, I've liked Paris Campbell, but he was hurt last year, so that could be a bounce back year for him. I guess, is it a bounce back if it would be your first good year after in your 3rd year of the league? I guess it's not really a bounce, but
I mean, actually, that's kind of the normal trajectory for some of the wide receivers. You either boom like an AJ Brown, or you become almost irrelevant and then become a productive wide receiver like Amari Cooper.
we're very spoiled. Nobody has patience.
Exactly.
See, this is again my brain going sideways on some of these things. It would be fun to see Kirk Cousins get moved somehow for Carson Wentz interdivision. Some picks attached, so Titans can fully stack that Indianapolis passing game. But I digress.
Wow, no, actually, that's a really smart move, and I really like that because I may be in the minority here, but I don't know if Wentz is going to make it the full year, and I'd prefer to have that security blanket of Eason.
Yeah,
well, and
he'd have the full stack.
I mean, if somebody's willing to swap quarterbacks with him and be able to use a trade extension on Kirk, that's also really interesting.
Yeah. That brings an added value, added level of value to Kirk that he didn't have previously. I mean, maybe
he was the quarterback 13.
Yep.
Which would be I'm not, the percentages are.
I think that's 15%.
15. Well, plus the 5% for trade extension.
Actually, no, what he was 13. You said. I was using the wrong level there.
His current contract is $34.7 million, and
8.
it would go up. It would
so
go
plus
up
13%.
It would be a $40 million contract with the plus 5% with the trade extension too. Oh, I'm sorry, that's if he added 1 year. I'm sorry, that's if he added a 1 to 2 year extension. But assuming that he added longer, it would be a $39.4 million contract. So not cheap, but still trade extension.
And then, if you need to, renegotiate
right at the end of the year.
Yeah, and then he's a $20 million quarterback with a decent contract. How old is Kirk Cousins now?
32.
Oh. Well, I do hate me some 32-year-old quarterbacks, bah humbug. Granted, Peter King thinks the 49ers should trade the 12th pick and Jimmy Garoppolo for him, but I digress. That's a conversation for another day.
I wouldn't trade either one of those 2 assets for him straight up.
Yeah.
But that's why I'm not a GM in the NFL.
Yeah.
Among other things.
I mean, they'd all being so intimidated by the beard that it just wouldn't work out.
Most likely. It would probably close a lot of trade doors.
All right. Another hour and 20 minute plus podcast here. That's what we wanted to go through. Any parting thoughts before we shut things down for the week?
I'm really happy with the level of activity with the new owners. So just wanted to give them a little pat on the back. You guys are doing great, and keep it up. Keep sending out trades, regardless of how terrible they are.
Keep on.
And don't take RJ's example. Accept a trade, reject a trade. One of the two.
Yes, don't sit on trades, and if you are going to decline them, which I have seen an increase in comments and decline.
Yeah, that's been nice. I have noticed that.
So I am glad that a lot of people are starting to listen to the small things that we say on the pod. Because Brett, I know you've said it a couple of times that like people weren't very engaging about it. I think all of us really have. Just engage. Don't be like me. Don't sit on trade offers for 3 or 4 days.
All right. And what better way to end? Don't be like RJ. But anyone, thanks for listening. Hope everyone has a great week, and stay well, stay safe.